Today I'm going to talk about chainsaw safety and a little bit about maintenance. A couple months ago, we talked about chainsaw sharpening, which is kind of part of the maintenance, but today I'm going to talk really about, so for women, some of the safety and PPE that we use is just, we have a few more considerations that we need to make. And so talk about those today. Okay, I think everything's set up how it should be. There may be pauses if we have others, and I have to apologize for the short notes. Like I said, I was doing a training last week on the last couple days of the week, and it consumed me. And then I was like, oh, it's April. It's time for me to set up new lunch and learns. So hopefully I will get more ahead on these things and have those out. So this month, and I haven't even put out a flyer with our topics, but this month we'll do the chainsaw safety. Next week, I will talk about agroforestry. The week after that, Andy Riddle, she's a private lands conservationist for the MDC. She's going to join us and talk about improving habitat on our property for turkeys. And then the last one, we'll talk about mushrooms. So right now is not a great time for mushroom cultivation, but then as we get more into summer, it will be a good time for some of our wood-based mushroom cultivation. So we'll talk about that. So, and I will get right into chainsaw safety today. Oh, yep. Our quick, what is Women Owning Woodland? This is a program being developed to provide learning opportunities for women woodland owners and forest enthusiasts. Field days, lunch and learns, lots of classes geared toward our women forest landowners. And then the Facebook page that has just a place for sharing and learning about opportunities that are coming up. And then I don't have many as far as current events. So Quail Forever, Pheasants Forever, and I were planning a field day for April 29th, and we've had to reschedule that, and we have not found another date. That will be at Shaw Nature Reserve. So we're hoping to do, they have kind of a new forest prescribed fire crew that's working out of Shaw Nature Reserve and some things to show us up there. So we're hoping to do a field day there together. So more to come on that. So probably our most, well, there's a lot of really important pieces of PPE for chainsaw, using a chainsaw, or even some of our other woodland tools. And if you talk to some folks, wearing a hard hat all the time in the woods is something that they recommend just because of the risk of falling branches. So I don't wear a hard hat every time I'm in the woods, but if you are going into an area that perhaps has had some dieback, perhaps from emerald ash borer, or if you're going into an area that you've done like TSI, but the trees are still standing, wearing a hard hat in those particular areas is probably recommended because there is always that chance. But just for like a walk in the woods, you probably don't need to put a hard hat on. If you are using a chainsaw, you do need to have a hard hat. Considerations for this. So women's heads may be smaller than men's. So you want to make sure you find a hard hat that can be tightened to fit your head so that it's really snug. So if you move your head side to side or back and forward, you want to make sure that hard hat does not fall off. So if you think about chainsaw, especially, like most of us are not going to be cutting trees down, but we're going to actually be, limbing trees, perhaps cutting branches off of them, bucking them into smaller pieces, cutting them smaller for firewood. So we're going to be bent over a lot of the time. So you want to make sure that hard hat fits you well. And we should maintain our hard hat. So you want to clean the interior padding. So things like staph infections can result from dirty padding. And if you're a woman who wears makeup, this can get onto that padding. So things like foundation will rub off. And this creates some of those breeding grounds for bacteria. So periodically, many of them have padding that can be removed, or you can just kind of run over a disinfecting wipe to keep that padding clean. Hard hats do expire, so they have kind of a limited lifespan. And so you would you might think that this would be marked on the hard hat like a use by or a sell by date, but it's not. So you can look and find when the hard hat was manufactured, and I'll show you a picture on this next slide that talks about where to find that manufacturer date. It's usually below the brim and what it looks like. And so when you turn it over and take a look, it should look like this. So there's a number in the middle, which is the year that it was manufactured. So this hard hat was manufactured in 2013. And then the arrow points to the month that's numbered 5. So this hard hat was manufactured in May of 2013. And so the standard lifespan is like 3 to 5 years after you manufacture. And then you should consider replacing it. And this is, I mean, even if you've not had any like damage or, your hard hat has not undergone any stress to it, it can still be weak. So we wear it outside, of course, it gets UV damage and that plastic will weaken over time. So then if something does happen and falls on it, it's not going to hold up as well. Other things are hearing protection. So chainsaws are very loud and it is a constant noise. And so if you look here, this is, sound advice about protecting your ears from damaging noises. And so you can see where chainsaws are. So this 85 decibels is kind of the magic number. So exposure to noises above 85 decibels can cause permanent hearing loss. And so this, you can see chainsaws are here about 115-ish decibels for that. So it can cause long-term hearing loss and permanent hearing loss if you run one without hearing protection. And this is another one that most of the hearing protection recommended for chainsaws is going to cover your ears. And so thinking about things like earrings, that is another consideration when thinking about this. So, and then just a quick look at the different types of hearing protection that you can use. So again, I love the chainsaw helmets. So it's a little bit more costlier than probably buying things individually, but this is kind of your eye protection, which we're going to talk about, your hearing protection and your hard hat kind of all built in one. It can be expensive if you're going to replace it every 3 to 5 years. So some other options are to use earplugs. The foam earplugs also work. Hearing protection from like shooting sports, it can also work. Sometimes we have helmets that have just the ear protection built into the hard hat. So lots of choices, but you just need something that is going to quiet that noise so it does not cause permanent hearing damage from running that chainsaw. Eye protection is another really important thing. So safety goggles do a great job of blocking debris and sawdust, but they also will fog up due to perspiration, which makes them more of a safety hazard than not wearing them, because it's going to impair your vision when you can't see around the foggy glasses. So a good solution is to invest in a hard hat with hearing protection and that fine mesh face shield. And so this is designed so that it's hard to see right here. So it's even finer where your vision is, but it keeps most of that debris and sawdust out of your eyes. It's again, kind of all built in one. It's a metal mesh, but it breathes, so there's no fogging up. There's occasionally a piece of sawdust or errant debris that will make its way kind of from the side, or most common time that I get sawdust or any type of debris in my eye is when I've like lifted that face mask and like touched my face for some reason, and I'll get a piece of sawdust that comes like off my gloves or something. So this mesh face shield will work really well. If you talk to some safety folks, they'll recommend wearing safety glasses underneath this, but that would be, your personal discretion there. It's also good to carry 1 or 2 bottles of water to serve as an emergency eye wash station, just in case you do get sawdust in your eyes. Like I said, most commonly sawdust gets in my eyes when I'm not cutting something, but I'm touching my face and it has attached itself to my glove, and then it gets in my eye that way. Which is a good segue into our other piece of PPE, which are gloves. These are ones that can be tricky to find. having smaller hands. So women's hands are typically smaller than men's, but you want to make sure you take the time to find a good pair of gloves that fits you properly. So if you have too much on the end of the fingertips, like this can get in the way, this can interfere with your control of the chainsaw. So you want to make sure that they fit really well. And here's a good time to, if a chainsaw vibrates a great deal, which can cause some other types of nerve damage to hands. So if you can find the anti-vibration gloves, those will help a great deal. You should be able to bend your fingers easily, so you don't want to go the opposite direction and get gloves that are too small. And then you want to find gloves that have a Velcro or strap to tighten them around the wrist to stop debris from falling inside. So and this just keeps those things that would irritate us as we're cutting from irritating us. Anything that causes a distraction can also be a hazard when operating a chainsaw. Chaps are the next thing. You should never ever operate a chainsaw without chaps. These are designed to stop the chainsaw before it. So should you accidentally or lose control of the chainsaw, the majority of our accidents from chainsaws are either that are cutting related. So if a chainsaw cuts a person, most of them are going to be on the upper leg or on the right side of so right leg, right arm, and right side of the face. And this is so occasionally when the chainsaw goes and if it hits something and bucks back, it'll hit your upper arm or your face, or if you cut through something, it's usually your right leg that's forward and it'll cut that. So chaps protect your legs, and I've heard lots and lots of, particularly from our loggers, they don't like to wear chaps because they are hot. They're sometimes difficult to move around in, but they will save your life. So there's that. So I would say you should never operate a chainsaw without them. That being said, they can be tricky to find for women that fit. So I am a 4'11" woman, and I do not have long legs. And so I have had to I don't modify the chaps, but I've had to wear them like extra high up on my waist so that they fit my leg well. The good thing is that they do strap to your legs. And so having the ability to do that, I can kind of adjust the length of them. You don't want them so long that they cover your hip and you're going to trip over, or cover your shoe and you are going to trip over them while you're walking. Walking through the woods can be difficult without having an extra layer on, but you want to make sure that these fit as good as possible to avoid any instances of falling when you're carrying your chainsaw around. Again, they should cover your leg from hip to the top of your foot. You don't want them to be short either, leaving your ankle unprotected or the front part of your leg unprotected. So you do want them to hit the top of your foot. The proper length is determined by the out seam, not the inseam. So this is going to be the outer length of your leg, from hip to the top of your foot. And then they will sometimes give them, so this is the size code, and you can see it matches up with the out seam. For the waist portion, most of them are all that I have seen. They are adjustable. So they usually have buckles and you can adjust the waist size for them. So this makes that part fit easier. So we really pay attention to the out seam. They do also make, and they're fairly expensive, usually several $100s, but you can also buy pants that have the built-in material from chaps. And so inside the chaps, there's all this Kevlar material, and it's strands and strands and strands of it. And so if you happen to cut into your chaps with your chainsaw, all of that material, it's super strong, but it's very lots and lots of threads of it, and it will wrap around your chainsaw chain and it will actually stop your chainsaw. It's not great for your chainsaw, but it's better than of course suffering an injury because of it. And so after that, of course, you have to pick all those strands out of your chainsaw. You should also, if you have had a close call such that so you've cut into your chaps, you should replace your chaps at this point. And this is because if you've cut that particular area, the chances are that if you were to have a repeat incident, it would be pretty much the same area and it won't have the same layer of protection that you have. And the other thing is you can and should wash your chaps periodically, so they can get oily from bar oil and chain oil that we put in there, but then and lots of wood debris. So you don't usually use any detergent, but you can kind of wash them off with water. Sometimes you can use a really mild detergent if you have a lot of grease buildup that you're trying to get off. And then you have to let it dry completely before you would use them, but it is good to keep them clean. Foot protection. So we officially say sneakers or leather boots don't protect our feet from a moving chainsaw, which is true. If you're going to operate a chainsaw a lot, chainsaw boots or some type of steel-toed boot would be the best protection. One of the more affordable ways of protecting our feet is you can actually buy steel toe covers that fit over top of your shoe. They're a little awkward to walk around in, but they are kind of a less expensive way to protect feet. Now I've gone through several chainsaw safety trainings and operation trainings, and for those that they have told us that we could get away with wearing a leather boot. But if you're going to operate a chainsaw a great deal, I would suggest some type of protection beyond just like a leather shoe that will protect your feet. So, and again, I will say that this is a place that we are getting more selection. So finding steel-toed boots for women seems like the selection is getting better and there's increased options for this. So if you're looking for that, if you look in the work boot section of a lot of stores, like sporting goods stores or boot stores, you will find that there's definitely some more choices for women there. Here, so this is another one that's kind of, I won't say completely exclusive to women, but we do generally have, find that women will have longer hair or some type of, arrangement that needs to fit under a hat, a hard hat. And so if you have long hair, it's best to pull it back into a ponytail or a braid or some other arrangement that will keep it securely out of your way. Now the ponytails can be tricky because that hard hat kind of slides further back. So it needs to be a lower ponytail or somehow fit in those straps of that hard hat. So we want to make sure that also, even if you have shorter hair, which fits under the hard hat well, you want to make sure that anything in the front, so bangs or side strands, are going to be pushed back and out of your face because you don't want it to come loose and get in your eyes while you're cutting. So those are good things to think about. Undergarments, so sports bras or racerback bras provide a lot more comfort and will probably also make it easier for you to use your saw because of there's no strap sliding down your shoulders. They also tend to provide a little bit more support for using a chainsaw. So there's a lot of vibration, and so it's just good to feel comfortable and prevent you from fidgeting or readjusting. So again, working a chainsaw, it can and is dangerous to do. So the fewer distractions you have and the fewer discomforts that you have elsewhere helps you pay attention to running that chainsaw. So, and again, good support bras can also lighten the burden on your back while you're sawing. Outer garments, again, comfort is really important here, but also, kind of thinking about protection from the elements. So you want to make sure that you wear clothes that are comfortable and that you can move freely in, but you don't want them to be so baggy or loose that they interfere with your chainsaw operation. You also want to make sure that like operating a chainsaw is kind of like taking an outside run. You want to make sure that you're dressed appropriately for the weather. Most of us run our chainsaws during the winter, or at least this is my preferred time if I'm going to go, you know, cut firewood, or if I'm going to go do TSI. I prefer the winter because operate, you know, all that gear gets hot. So it's kind of like, again, going back to kind of like taking a run, you want to dress like one level less than you would if you were just going to stand outside. And this is because you are going to work up a sweat if you're operating a chainsaw. And so you don't want to have so many layers on that you are, you know, dying of heat while you're trying to operate the chainsaw. And you want to also make sure that you can move comfortably so it doesn't get in your way. Jewelry. So general rules, just to leave all the jewelry at home when you're planning to do saw work. Long necklaces and bracelets have the potential to get stuck in a saw. They can also get caught on other things in the woods like limbs or vegetation, also be a distraction. Earrings, those earmuffs can push earrings back into your head, leading to discomfort or pain. And then metal rings on your fingers, so like even simple metal bands can cause some discomfort, because generally our hands will start to swell while we operate the chainsaw, kind of from the vibration, usually from the heat. And so if those rings are on, one, your finger might swell, which can kind of cut circulation off to it if the ring is on there. Can also cause calluses to your hands from that vibration against it. Just a quick look. So here's our appropriately attired woman of the woods who has been operating her saw. So gloves, hearing protection, face protection, hard hat. And one thing I didn't cover when I talked about clothing is that long sleeves are ideal. So this is going to protect you from debris that comes off when you're sawing, protects you from other things in the woods like thorns or scratchy branches and shrubs, any abrasions from that. And then she has on her chaps, and you can't see her boots, but she does have on a good pair of boots. Selection. So this can actually be almost as important as the rest of our PPE is choosing a chainsaw that works for us. So quick comparison. So there are electric or corded chainsaws, and I'm going to put a plug in here because we have some new battery powered saws from Steel and Husqvarna that are actually quite capable of cutting some of our larger wood even, and they're getting a little bit lighter and easier to start. So most of our battery operated saws are like a push button start, which is really nice compared to the pull handle start. So I'm just going to put that plug in there for them because the rest of it operates the same as a regular saw. So it still has bar, it still needs bar oil, but it has that battery instead of a gas oil mixture. And again, some benefits is that they usually vibrate less and are a little bit quieter to operate. They're lighter, a little bit cleaner because you don't have to worry about mixing gas and oil together. So a little bit easier to maintain and use. Again, these have been getting larger in the last few years, but they are, again, ideal for like pruning or cutting up smaller wood. If you choose a corded chainsaw, those can't be used outdoors in wet weather. And usually it limits your distance that you can travel because you have to have them plugged into an outlet unless you have a generator. And then our cordless or electric, they have had the issue of insufficient battery life. So this has gotten better again in the last couple of years. Those batteries have gotten more efficient. But it does limit, again, you probably won't see a logger anytime soon running out with a battery powered chainsaw because the life of that battery is pretty short. But if you're just cutting up a couple pieces of wood for firewood, it might be a good option. Gas chainsaws, so they usually cut faster. You can use them anywhere. So rain or snow doesn't matter because they don't have an electric component to them. They do tend to be heavier and noisier than the electric or battery powered chainsaw options. And then they require just a little bit more maintenance. So for a 2-cycle engine, you need to mix oil with gasoline and then store that So it usually requires a separate container for your mixed fuel. And then if we don't operate a chainsaw very often, leaving that mix of fuel and oil in there, it can cause buildup over time. So if we don't use our saw frequently, it's good for us to either use it and use up all of the fuel in it, or to drain it periodically in between uses. Saws can get heavy for anyone. The weight of a chainsaw is nearly always specified for the power head only. So that's going to be the engine portion of the chainsaw. And this is because the guide bar, which is that long metal frame that the chain is on, and the chain, you can usually change those out for different sizes. And so you want to add another. So if you're looking at a chainsaw, the weight that they give you is pretty much for the engine only, and then you're going to want to add another 1.5 to 2 pounds, plus another pound for fuel. So that'll add to the weight of it. So if you're kind of looking at sizes that fit, it's also it's one thing to pick up a chainsaw and kind of like weigh it out for a period of time. But it's a whole other thing to carry that thing for an extended period of time and operate it at that weight. So it's good to, test them out just a little. What size guide bar do I need? That's another question that comes up when you're trying to select chainsaws, especially if you're an online shopper like I am. I'd recommend for buying a first chainsaw, going to a store and actually looking at the chainsaws and getting a feel for them. But you want to match the size of that guide bar to the type of job you expect to do most often. So if you think you're going to mostly be using it for limbing, cutting up small logs, and maybe felling smaller trees in your woods, a good lightweight chainsaw with a bar that's like 14 inches or less is a good choice. If you're going to be cutting more often and felling maybe larger trees, a mid-size chain, this is usually considered kind of like our farmer's chainsaw, if you will. And that's usually a bar that's 14 to 20 inches. And now, so most of our brands of chainsaw, they will come, you can purchase different sized bars. So for example, the chainsaw that I operate, I have a 16-inch bar and an 18-inch bar, and I actually could pick up a 14-inch bar for it as well. And then I can change that out based on the work that I'm going to be doing with it. And then again, if you go somewhere like a farm store and you're looking at all chainsaws, you will see much larger chainsaws. So anything over 20 inches of bar is usually a professional logger's chainsaw, and not recommended for just kind of our average casual chainsaw users. Some safety features of a chainsaw that help protect us, the kickback or safety chain. And so this is a chain that has kind of the teeth are a certain way so that it will not kick back as much. It does minimize it, it just doesn't eliminate it. But if you see a blue label on a chainsaw chain, that will mean that it's low kickback. And then a yellow label means it's like a professional chain. So this is really a logger's chain, because again, they operate a chainsaw all day, every day. And they're usually more familiar with how the kickback works on a chainsaw. Other features, so again, safety chain is the low kickback chain. A wraparound front handle, so this is going to protect your protect your hands. A chain catch is another thing. Let's see if I can see it on the picture. So there's usually a feature that if the chain were to fall off your bar, it'll catch that chain before it flies off. The front hand guard, and then this is also our what we call a chain brake inertia sensor. So if you're chainsawing and it flips back, this handle here will get flipped forward and it will automatically turn off the chain rotation. So because it kind of indicates to it, oh, it's bucking back. You don't want it to be moving around. cut you when it comes back. So again, just some safety features. Again, I'm not going to go too much into maintenance today, but maintenance can be an important part of keeping our chainsaws safe. So it's good to have like sharpen the chain. So kind of like a dull knife, a dull chainsaw can also lead to more instances of accidents, because if you are struggling because it's not cutting well or it's taking a long time to cut through, this can again lead to more errors and chances for it to like work improperly and cut you or harm you in some other way. Good also to maintain correct chain tension, proper lubrication, and make sure that all our safety equipment is functioning. So if it indications that your chain needs sharpening, so the saw is cutting crooked, the cut produces really tiny sawdust instead of chips. If you have to press down really hard, so again, this is where some of those accidents can happen. If you have to press down really hard to keep it cutting, or if you smell the smell of burnt wood, so instead of cutting through it, it's actually just like burning the wood out. These are all indications it can be sharpened, needs to be sharpened. For sharpening, so I'll probably run it again as a lunch and learn probably sometime in the near future, but so you can learn how to sharpen your chain yourself, or oftentimes our chainsaw dealers, they will offer sharpening the chain as a service. So you just take your chain in and then they'll sharpen it for you. Correct chain tension. So you want to check the chain tension regularly. So if it's too loose, your chain will come off. And if it's too tight, it will bind up and overheat. And chains are made of metal, and metal, when it gets hot, it will stretch out. And so we will often have it tightened up just right. And then we'll cut. So it's good to cut for like a half an hour and then kind of check your tension. And you'll probably have to tighten it up just a little bit after that because it's stretched out a little. Again, most manufacturers recommend a cold chain be tightened to where the chain tie straps hang away from the bar. And this is hard to show, but if you have a metal bar, your chain should just hang just a little bit off of it. So it should just be a little bit loose. And that gives it room to move around that bar. Lubrication. So it's good to check your manufacturer's directions on how and where oil goes. This is lubrication for the chain and where it goes around the bar. So in the summer, you can use either an SAE 30 or bar and chain oil. And in the winter, you can use, this is all viscosity. And so in the summer, it's hotter. And so that oil will, that can be thicker, which is like a 30. With the heat, it'll thin out, but the SAE 10 is a little bit more viscous and it will not gum up during the winter like an SAE 30 would. Or you can just get bar and chain oil, which is actually intended for chainsaws, and they usually will work in any temperature. And this, again, a lot of our like casual users of chainsaws they usually buy the bar and chain oil, but some of our loggers will try to, just be a little bit thriftier and use like used oil as bar oil. And you don't want to use that because it can corrode your oil pump. That has grit in it that can damage your chainsaw over time. It's also important that you make sure your bar oiling mechanism is working correctly because this can burn up your chainsaw if it's not lubricated. So if, when you start it, make sure the oil pump is functioning. You can test this. So if you hold your saw like above like a light colored surface, there should be some oil splatter that comes off of it. And this just indicates that it's putting out some bar oil and lubricating. So again, you don't want to have, it is metal on metal. So it's a metal chain on a metal bar, and that lubrication is going to keep it moving smoothly. As mentioned, the chain brake is designed to stop the chain almost instantaneously. It's either activated manually or triggered by the inertial forces of the kickback itself. You want to make sure that you look at your owner's manual to make sure that chain brake is working, and that you know before you start that it is working. And this is one of those things that we don't recommend that people fix themselves. If their safety equipment isn't working, you should take it to a service technician. Also, when working in the woods, it's important that you have some of these supplies for maintenance of your chainsaw. So wrenches to fit all the nuts and lugs on the saw, screwdrivers, a round file and a file guide if you need to touch up your chain for sharpening, that flat file and depth gauge. Again, if you have to do some sharpening on the fly. It's always good to have a spare spark plug and carry your owner's manual with you. And then it does also help to have towels or some type of cloth that you can use to, again, if you're moving the chain around or if you're placing it on something. And, you know, I can tell you my horse, not really a horror story, but I took my chainsaw out actually for a chainsaw class nonetheless. It got, and I didn't take my tools with me. So I broke the first rule, and I ended up with a wood chip that got kind of like underneath my chain and in the bar of my chainsaw, and it stopped up. Like we rubbed it and rubbed it and rubbed it, and the chain would not run. So I actually, again, got caught with the chainsaw that was not in working order for that particular workshop. And I had to take that home and clean it all up. So again, it was kind of two things on my part. I hadn't cleaned my chainsaw properly after the last time I used it, and then I did not take my stuff to the field with me like I should have. So examples of what not to do. Okay, I think I went through any questions today. I'll quit sharing so you can see me. So it seems like the fall and then the spring is when we pull out the chainsaws, because we either have things that need cleaned up from the winter, or we're, out doing things because it's cool out and it's a good time to run a chainsaw. Yes, thank you, Marcia, for sharing that. Cobalt battery saw. I tried out a steel. I think it's next on my purchase list, particularly for demonstrations. Not too heavy?
No, not heavy at all.
Very good. And your battery lasts for a fair amount of time?
Yeah, it lasts as long as I should be out there, and then I have to take a break. So it works out good for me.
Yeah, that's like a nice measurement of when to stop. Very good. Any other questions today? And I saw your comment about leaving your lawn for dandelions and weeds, and the pollinators came. Very exciting. I know I drove up to Columbia yesterday, and I saw, this is not related to chainsaws, but I saw that the red buds are like just on the cusp of blooming, which is very exciting. So I think we have one more freeze warning for like Friday into Saturday, and then hopefully we're past that. Very good. Milwaukee Mini, and you think, yep. But if it's too tight, it won't cut very well either. So, yep. Yep, that might be, and it usually has a bolt kind of further back, and it lets you adjust the tightness of that chain. Okay, good. Very good. So, and if you're playing with tightness of your chain, like, you can, it's good, take the screwdriver field with you, and you can, kind of tighten it and loosen it and see what feels best as far as cutting, for sure. All right, well, without Oh, glad to hear that. Oh, and that was I need to look back. A Milwaukee battery powered chainsaw. Very good. And good battery life, and it's light. Yes. So I've been thinking about for demonstrations getting a battery powered chainsaw that's of similar size to my gas powered chainsaw, and then it would be a nice comparison for users. So, and I'm trying not to marry myself to a brand because they each have pros and cons. So very good. Marcia, I was going to mention on here, so if anyone's in the Rolla area, the native plant sale in the Rolla area from our master naturalist is coming up. Marcia, I just looked at the date. Do you know it off the top of your head?
I think it's May 22nd.
Okay, I think you're right. So that's coming up. There's lots of, I think I saw there's another one maybe in the Columbia area at Run or Jeff City area at Runge this weekend. So if you're looking for native plants, now's the time to look for those plant sales. All right. Well, hopefully I will see you next week. Have a great rest of this week.